Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on Healthy Love. I'm Cynthia Clark, relationship expert and palm reading consultant. And if you're looking for long-lasting love, you can find me over at loveinyourhands.com. And this podcast is all about helping you be healthier and happier in your relationships. So I love to bring really amazing guests onto the show. And today I have a fantastic guest. I'm super excited to introduce you to her. Her name is Judy Graybill, and she is an international relationship expert and certified step family coach. And she helps couples to work through challenges as a team so that they can experience a stronger spousal relationship, harmony, and deeper emotional intimacy. She has helped clients across 5 continents. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. She is also a speaker, consultant, and the author of the upcoming book, Journey to Real Love. So thank you so much, Judy, for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about your story to begin. You know, how did you get into this, and what made you decide to do this?
Oh, wow. So I'll try to do the narrowed down version. So basically, I started as a step family coach, which is why I'm certified step family coach, because of my personal experience as a stepmom, which was really the most challenging thing I've ever gone through, and learning experience. So I became a certified step family coach, and I really just started with just helping people with step family dynamics. And then after several years of doing that, I expanded to helping people more with the co-parenting with the ex-spouse. And then more recently, in the last couple years, I've expanded to helping all couples, because the step family dynamics you can't really help people with the step family dynamics if they're having relationship issues. So the relationship issues it's the more underlying foundation of the relationship. So I still help people with step family stuff. I still help the remarriages with children, but I'm actually expanded out more into the bigger relationship issues that helps everybody, whether you're a step family or you're not a step family. So that's, I guess, the down and dirty way at how I got here.
Well, that's great. I mean, I'm sure people need help with that. I mean, that's got to be it sounds to me like a really tough dynamic to work through.
Yes. And so and not only that is I feel like what I notice and what I see is that there's so many people who really don't know how to have a healthy relationship. And I think that's one of the reasons I gravitated towards your podcast, Healthy Love, because I love that title, because that's what I'm trying to help people do. And I think that there's so many people who don't know how to do that. And there's so many mixed messages in society about how to do that. It's one of the reasons why so many relationships don't work. And a lot of people are really confused about that. I mean, a big part of my market is adult children of divorce who don't even have that model of what a healthy relationship looks like. And so they need somebody to give them that model. And then, like with the step family dynamic, if you're in a remarriage, there's definitely no models for that. And those don't even operate the same as a first relationship. And then even if you have a successful, healthy first relationship that somehow fails outside of your own skill, or, outside of everything that was in your ability, it falls apart anyway. And then you move on to another relationship, and that person has children from a previous relationship, or you do, you're still going to automatically want to use the same strategies that you used in your first relationship, and the ones that always worked for you before, and they won't work for you in the new relationship. So There's so many challenges out there, and people just don't have the right blueprint.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because a lot of times we model new relationships on our old relationships.
Yes.
And
And honestly, even that is one of the things that will come out more in the topics, is that's one of the reasons why it doesn't work also, is not even if we did things healthy in the other relationship, but even the unhealthy things that we did in previous relationships that we didn't know were unhealthy, we'll still bring those into the new relationship. So it's called baggage. I don't really like that term, but that's the term that most people know. And we bring that into our new relationships. And so that's actually part of what the challenge is. I mean, regardless of whether it worked or didn't, it's a pattern that we've developed based off of our previous relationships, and we bring them into the current relationship.
absolutely. So looking at these faces of love, that's what I want to talk about today. Uh, can you describe what are these three faces, and what do they look like?
Hey, well, that's a great question, and we'll do like one at a time, because so let's talk about conventional love. So, and we kind of already touched upon this a little bit. So conventional love is really what we learn in society, and conventional love can be healthy or it can be unhealthy. But because it's conventional, it is accepted, and we don't know whether even if it's unhealthy, we think it's healthy. For example, and this is a new trend that I've noticed over the last maybe several years. So I've had clients that come to me are in they're having a relationship that doesn't work, and their parents are still married. So now a big part of my market has always been adult children of divorce, and I'm in that dynamic as well. So this was a very interesting thing for me to learn, that all these children of successful marriages are having the same challenges that adult children of divorce have. And I'm like, what's going on here? And when I look deeper at this, their parents have an unhealthy dynamic. It's successful, they're still married, they've been married 20 years, 30 years, sometimes longer, but there's still some unhealthy patterns there that the kids have learned. Codependency is one of the most common ones that I've noticed. There's others, but that's the biggest one, and that's just one example that's easy to look at. And I don't want to talk about codependency. I'm just using an example.
Can we just define it, maybe? How would you define codependency?
Yeah, so the bottom line of codependency is a need to be needed, to the point that you will sacrifice your own needs in order to help your partner. And sometimes, in extreme cases, you're actually manufacturing problems that don't exist in order to actually help the other person. So you're going to make a mountain out of a molehill in order to help that other person when they don't actually need it. That's partly what codependency is. But the thing with the codependent relationship is that what makes it successful is that the other person kind of doesn't know their own power. They're not in an empowered state, and they're okay with somebody always fixing the problem, and they're okay with somebody just doing everything. And you get into a pattern.
Yeah.
And just get into a pattern of allowing somebody else to, and that becomes your dynamic. My husband has always fixed these problems. So, I mean, and you can go 20 years, your husband always fixed the problems, and then you just never learn how to fix it. And that's like a common thing. And then, but that bleeds over to the kids, and then the kids are like, so, and I've noticed this, it's both men and women, but, so I'm not going to mention a gender, but one thing I noticed, like if it's a man, for example, they're like, if their dad has always been the fix-it person and their mom was the disempowered person, then the son will actually always want to be that fix-it person, and they're always going to want to come in. And if they're now married to somebody who is an independent person or a free thinker, then it's going to cause problems, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's super common, especially with these conventional type relationships, because, you know, I grew up in Utah, which is a very conservative state. And, you know, the traditional roles of marriage were highly encouraged. And
Right,
I mean, you were considered an old lady if you weren't married by the time you were like 23 years old. And
right.
it's
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
whoa. So I got married really young. I was 21. And it's like, yeah, you're supposed to depend on your husband for everything. And that, like, that was encouraged. And,
Right,
you know, I look back on that whole dynamic of like, wow, that really wasn't the best. That was not in my best interest, because it taught me to be really submissive and just to stay kind of in that role of like, oh, I can't really do anything.
right, right. So,
You
and
know?
the other side of conventional is like in the market, or the dynamic that I'm in, which is adult children of divorce. You have that it's okay to leave, and then that becomes a pattern. And then it's like, yeah, well, you did the right thing by leaving because he was never going to change anyway. So then it becomes conventional to just leave at the drop of a hat. And the younger generation actually does that a lot. You know, it's like, it's not working, so uh, kick him to the curb, and like, you go, girl, you go. You know what I mean? Like, that's
So,
also
yeah.
conventional.
So do you think that is part of the problem of why the divorce rates are so high in, at least in our country, in the United States?
Yeah, I do think that that is part of the reason. So the divorce is a double-edged sword, because there's a lot of people who, in this conventional method that I'm mentioning, is they don't give their relationship the due opportunities, and they're not pushing themselves. And this can be explored more when we talk about the last part of the last phase of love, the unconditional love, because people are not doing that. They don't know how to have that unconditional love, so they're not stretching themselves enough. They're not understanding what is it inside them that they need to change or do differently. And they tend to like look at the other person. You're not doing this, you're not doing that, and I've been trying to get you to do these things, you're not listening to me. And so because you're not listening to me, you're not changing, you obviously can't change, so therefore I'm just going to leave. That's very conventional, and that is part of the reason for divorce.
Sure. Makes sense.
So I do think that that's part of the reason for the rates.
Hmm.
The other thing with divorce, though, is like, sometimes divorce is necessary, or at least not a bad thing, I should
Right.
say. I shouldn't say, because in toxic situations, it is necessary.
Right.
Although this episode is not about toxicity, because I don't want to get to those extremes.
Right.
Um, but I think that I don't want people to feel guilty about the divorce, though, either, because if you've already had divorces in the past, it doesn't do you any good to feel guilty about those. It's just, I want people to learn from those.
Right.
So maybe they didn't do enough. Maybe they could have done more in those relationships to make it work, and they didn't. But I don't want people to feel guilty for that. I just want them to learn from that, so that in the next relationship or the current relationship, they can do it better. But I do think that people don't push themselves enough. And sometimes they go the other extreme and stay in a relationship way too long, even,
Yeah. That was me.
and that goes into the realm of toxicity,
Yeah, that was me. I lasted 19 years in my first marriage, and it was
Part of
maybe,
me wants to say congratulations.
yeah, it was maybe 4 or 5 years too long, which, you know, looking back on it, but, you know, it is what it is. And you're right. There's a lot of guilt after that happens. And it's like, oh no, it just ended. And now I feel horrible.
Right. And we learn that guilt. That's also built in. I mean, like in our culture, like the whole conversation about divorce, it actually emphasizes the guilt and that you should feel guilty because, like this horrible thing
Right.
happened. And it's definitely not pleasant,
No.
but at the same time, the guilt doesn't help. It's just, and you, as you said, it was maybe 4 or 5 years too late. But what happened for you is your current marriage. So,
Yeah, that's true. And I'm so happy now. So I'm so grateful.
right.
And
And you're a success story because you learned from your first relationship where you want to be able to help people now. You know what I mean?
no, I've always been very self-reflective. And I think that's good. It's good
Yes,
to look at every relationship and take the responsibility that you played in it, because yeah, we all are responsible, you know.
right.
So for sure, I'm willing to look at that and take, take the ownership of my part in the whole thing.
Right, right. That is huge. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't do that for various reasons. And partly, I mean, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah.
So to look at your
So
own.
yeah, so let's talk about the second face of love, the distorted face. What is that? How is that different from the conventional?
Okay, so the distorted love is where a lot of people get confused. They get the mixed messages of what real love is. So, for example, if like name calling is like probably the most easy symptom, I guess you could say, of the distorted love. Because if your partner is calling you lazy or a dumbass or like, I don't know if I can say that word, but you know what I mean? Or,
Yeah,
like, you know, calling you all kinds of like bad names.
stupid
And
face.
then like 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, I love you so much, and because, and they'll switch back and forth.
Mhm.
And, you know, that's what distorted love is, because that's not real love,
No.
and sometimes people do that to motivate people, sometimes it's like, because that's what they learned maybe growing up, maybe it was a very innocent thing. Your mom, slapped you over the head and said, oh, you bonehead, you know better, and
Mhm.
you learn that my mom really loves me and she called me a bonehead. So now I'm accepting that as love.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not saying your mom doesn't really love you. She really does. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. But what I'm saying is that sometimes is the first step in accepting that. And then once we accept that, then in relationships, as we get older, it is, we're more willing to accept somebody calling us bigger names or harder names, or accepting it in other different areas.
Mhm.
So if we have, um, it doesn't always start in childhood, but what I've noticed is a lot of times that it does, and it's not, we have to be very, really caring about our parents. We can't look at it as a bad thing. But at the same time, we have to be really honest. Did we learn unhealthy patterns from our parents? And if our parents really, really pushed us hard, and in order to motivate us, they said that we were lazy in order to motivate us, then, that's actually, it's a distorted love, because it's like, it's it's not empowering. We
Mhm.
think it's empowering, but it's not.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
uh, that's one way to look at the distorted love. Like another way to look at, another thing about distorted love is, um, maybe you have a partner or like a couple and that are telling each other they love each other all the time and they're doing really good. And all of a sudden one day, the woman up and leaves. And there's no there's no mention of why she left. She just up and left because, and the person, the man left standing, so to speak, is wondering, did she really ever love me at all?
Mhm.
And she must not have been, either she didn't really love me, or she did love me, but she stopped loving me like in a day, and they're like, it's really confusing.
Mhm.
So that's also distorted love. That woman very well could have loved him. She just loved him in her own way, because more than likely her heart was already a little bit closed due to
Mhm.
like a previous relationship she had. So if her heart's a little bit closed and she's afraid to open it, she doesn't, again, it goes back to these other unhealthy patterns that we might have learned. All the conventional messages we hear over and over and over again, and from well-meaning friends, that actually have the opposite effect. Um,
Right.
so she doesn't know how to be honest with them. She doesn't know how to be honest with herself. So she might have been lying to herself when she said that she loved him, or she might have really loved him. And either way, that is a genuine love for her definition of love. It is just what
Right.
I call distorted love.
Yeah,
So,
that
and
makes perfect sense.
and the reason I came up with this term is because I want to help people understand what a healthy love looks like. And
Mhm.
in order to understand what a healthy love looks like, they need to understand what it's not.
Right.
So, um,
Yeah.
and people who have had this type of experience have a really hard time moving on to a new relationship, because then when they're in a new relationship and that person is telling them that they love him, or her, depending on what the gender is, then
Mhm.
they're like, yeah, so did the last person, and that person left me. So, and I'm
Mhm.
confused. I don't know why that happened.
Right.
So that's part of what distorted love is. Cheating is another form of distorted love. You know, you might really love a person and you still cheat on them. That's a distorted love,
Right.
because it's you're looking at the behaviors. It doesn't mean that that person doesn't really love their partner. If they're cheating, there's something wrong in the relationship for sure, because you wouldn't be cheating if there wasn't something wrong. There's a need that's not being met.
Mhm. Right.
But a unmet need is not the same thing as not loving a person. It's
Right.
just a distorted love, which is
Mhm.
unhealthy.
Yeah.
So, and what I encourage people to do is to look at um, the behavior. I mean, and I know that you attract a lot of empathic people. I'm guessing
Mhm.
based off of
Yes.
what you do, and I do too.
Mhm.
So the challenge with empathic people is that we see inside a person how genuine they are. We can
Right.
see their real emotions. We can see that and feel that they have a good heart. We know that they have insecurities. We feel that. We know that they're really good people, and yet they're acting out. And it's very confusing, and it's really hard to understand, why are they acting like this on the outside when I know that they love me? Is it not really love? And so I'm giving people a definition to understand it. It's a
Yeah.
distorted love. It is genuine love, but
Mhm.
it's based off of,
Their own wounding.
right, exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
Um, because we all have our own definition of what love is, based off of what we learned from our parents, based off of
Mhm.
what we learned in school, what we learned from our friends, the
Right.
advice from our friends,
Mhm.
and it goes on and on and on and on. Even counselors and other coaches who are very well meaning, but they teach those conventional methods and those religions. And I'm not trying to bash any religions. I'm just saying sometimes the interpretation is not helpful
Yes.
within a relationship.
Sure. Yeah. And I look at it from that hand perspective of the hand is reflecting those wounds, and you can see some of the stress and trauma through the hands. So it's
Oh, right.
you can actually identify some of that wounding. And yeah, you're right. As an empathic, which, obviously that's where I've been my whole life, I would see that wounding and I would go, oh, well, of course they're going through that problem. And then it would make me even more like want to help them or fix them or whatever.
Right,
And
right,
like, that's not necessarily what I'm here for.
right. And in the meantime, we're like waiting for them to because I'm not necessarily clairsentient it, but I can recognize people's potential, so I'm empathic in a different way.
Right.
And like one of the things like in my past relationship is like I can see the potential. Like
Yeah.
I know what they're actually capable of, but the
Right.
person who's showing up on a daily basis is
It's
not
not
that
that
person.
person.
So like I'm in love with the person they can be as
Yes.
opposed to the person that's actually showing up on a daily basis.
Right. And that's so hard because I've seen it in so many different cases, the people that I work with. And
Right,
it's like, okay, well, there's that distorted view, and you're coming from that super empathic, idealistic type area. And it's just, it's heartbreaking because usually they get hurt really badly. And
right. And
yeah,
right. And as an empathic person, you don't want to hurt that other person more,
no,
and
no,
so it's harder for us to point out
yeah,
those things sometimes because it's like, are we going to cause more scars? Are we going to open up those scars? It's like, and we don't want to do that,
right.
and we actually want to save people pain. We don't want to cause more. So in some ways, we're our own worst enemy when it comes to that because we then, because of be- our, our empathic nature is our biggest gift, but it can be, um, our biggest challenge too,
Hmm.
because
Yeah, for sure.
um, we want to help people and it's hard for us to point things out sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So let's look at that final face of love. What does that look like? What is that all about?
So unconditional love is, well, intellectually, everybody knows what it is, right? To love
In
without conditions, right?
Yes.
It's so much harder to actually experience though. And it's the reason why I tell people that true love is not for the faint of heart. True love takes work and true love takes effort because to love somebody unconditionally really means to actually mostly it means look at yourself first. Don't just point out the behaviors of somebody else because we have to recognize that our partners always are reflecting back at us. Like when our partners are triggering us, or rather, we are being triggered by what our partner does on a regular basis. The reason we're being triggered is because of our own wounding and because of our past patterns. It's
Hmm.
triggered by something that they say or do, but it's not the reason, if that makes
Yes.
sense. And you
Right.
probably know that, but I'm hoping your audience does. And it's hard to really look at that. So, um, for example, like it's very empowering. I mean, you're naturally an introspective person, as you said, and one of the things I said earlier is that it's really hard to look at our own stuff and to be honest with ourselves. One of the most brilliant things a friend of mine said once to me, and I just thought it was the most brilliant thing. He said the most courageous thing a person can do is be completely honest with themselves. I
Yeah,
just thought
for
it was
sure.
brilliant. I saved that in my mind.
Yes, I definitely agree with that because I feel like if you need to know what your hands are telling you, you need to look in that truth mirror. 100%, I agree with that because it helps you in every area of your life.
Right. And but what that looks like sometimes beyond the introspection is you still need to speak up to your partner and talk about what your needs are. So that's the next step. We look within ourselves and we take responsibility for what we did or we didn't do. But then we have to go the next step and actually talk to our partner about that. And we can't just keep looking at ourselves and kicking ourselves and blaming ourselves because it's not taking it to the next level. You still have to work through that with your partner. You have to, but the thing is, your partner is not going to change when you want your partner to change. Your partner is not going to, and even if your partner changes, it doesn't mean they're going to do it the way you want. And so
Right.
we have to love them anyway.
Yes.
And so that's what the unconditional loving is like, and they're bad habits that we keep. I mean, because really when we want them to change, it's for our own comfort level,
Right.
it's just, whether it's like you just keep not rinsing out your dishes, it could be something simple like that,
Yeah.
why do I always have to wash his dishes? Why do I have to load the dishwasher? I mean, it sounds petty, but
Right.
like if you have like 10 of those things in a day, it's just, it creates this tension, it creates this anxiety and this angst,
Yeah.
and when you know the unconditional love is like you're recognizing that the behavior is not the person, you know
Right. Right.
and 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 sometimes it's like, in some people, if they're not necessarily self-aware, they're only beginning to be introspective, they still have some work to do as far as understanding things. They might think that their partner is doing it to them. Like, my partner is purposely leaving all these dishes in the sink because he thinks I'm the one that just do it, and it's because of that, because I'm the woman and he thinks, so like that's where our conventional messages kind of screw with us, you know what I mean? Because
Definitely.
then we think that that's what our partner is doing, and that's not
That's
that's
not it at
not
all.
what they think.
Not the truth at all. No, absolutely not.
Right. So
No. So
um,
do you help people to kind of move into not only the awareness of these three faces of love, but do you help them to actually get more into that unconventional space? Or I'm sorry, the unconditional is what I meant to say.
I know what you meant.
Yeah, the
Right.
unconditional love space.
So I don't necessarily use those words in the session because um, then it goes into more of the theoretical stuff. Like when I'm actually coaching with clients, it's really about the practical steps. It is helping them to understand practically what this looks like and what they need to do. And I do help them to I help them. So I interpret is one of the things I say that I do for my clients. I interpret their partner's motives sometimes. I interpret their partner's messages, because sometimes people, the words they use are not really what they mean,
Right.
and vice versa. So that's why one of the reasons that's beneficial when I work with couples together is that I can verify, because I need to check in. I'm reading between the lines, and I'm looking underneath the surface based off of seeing a lot of different people and circumstances. So I have a bigger base of what's possible, what's more likely going on, but I still have to check in with them to see if I'm right. But
Sure.
I interpret, but then I give them practical steps.
Yeah.
So I don't spend a lot of time on the theoretical. I don't use the word unconditional love a lot, even though that is what I'm helping them do. You
Right.
know, it's sometimes words trip people up.
Yeah. Yeah, they
You
do.
know,
That's true. So, well, this has been a really interesting subject. I just love this. So,
it was a great conversation. I really loved your contribution to it.
yeah,
I thought we have a great dynamic. So it was,
yeah, for sure. So if people want to work with you, I understand that you're in Arizona, you're down in Phoenix, but you actually work with people worldwide. Is that correct?
yes, it is. And I do video conferencing. For international, I only do the video conferencing because that's expensive. But for if you're just in the United States, then I can do phone as well as video.
Okay,
Um,
great. And so
and
how
if
do
you're in
people,
Phoenix, then I'll meet you in your home.
okay, so how do people reach you? How do they find you?
The best way is through my website. It's brand new, so it's judygraybill.com. And because it's brand new, there's not a whole lot there yet, but I'm building it up because I'm ever evolving. People can find me on Facebook at Judy Graybill and Step Family Coach. My old website is also there, stepfamilycoach.com. People can find me there. And my old website, I just said that, stepfamilycoach.com. My Twitter handle is stepfamilycoach. And
Okay.
yeah, and my
Great.
website, Judy Graybill. And
All right, perfect. Well, I'm sure people will be excited to work with you. It sounds like you're incredibly knowledgeable. And what I love about you is that you have a really great way of explaining things, and just the whole understanding that you have behind the relationship is just you're a wealth of knowledge.
oh,
So
thank you.
yeah,
That's such a compliment. That's
yeah. So I can see that people coming to you would really get a thorough um, and a really helpful assistance. So that's great. So
thank you.
yeah,
And
so
likewise with you too. I mean, like I'm still fascinated with what you do. I mean, like all the stuff you can discover on somebody's hand is just so
yeah.
incredibly intriguing.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you everybody for listening in and tuning in, and join us again next time on Healthy Love. And please let us know what you want to talk about or what you want us to talk about. And also please subscribe to our channel. And everybody have a fantastic day.
Thank you.